Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ælfric Homily Project, or a Ælfric Homily Project, if you want to put it that way. I am Liam, and a couple weeks ago, I had the reading for Ælfric's first series homily on Easter release. In that, in the meantime, I have gone out of town, and now the next semester of my schooling has started, so I have been burying myself in the Eddas. It's a Norse literature class, but I still want to be able to get these out, especially a lecture for a homily reading I already have out. So hopefully there'll be no more delays. Like hopefully I will get the homily reading out in May and then one in June. We'll see how well it or how smoothly it goes. But I'm glad to be back here today and talking about Easter. It's now, again, like I said, been a couple weeks, so hopefully it's not too far out of your memory. It is Easter season still, so. But let's get right into it. So Easter is a unique name for this holy day, this Christian holy day. It's really only, well, kind of, sort of has this unique name. We'll mention like an exception, and I think maybe like some Slavic stuff might be a little bit more out there, but something closer to Pascha, okay, is the typical name in most languages, as the holiday itself has relations to the Hebrew Passover, as the Last Supper, for example, is like a Seder dinner, right? So was in relation to that season of Passover. And so Easter is also right around that same time. And so unsurprisingly, the name for Easter normally comes from the name for Passover, which is Pesach in Hebrew, or I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. My Hebrew, though I used to actually, when I was a child, my Hebrew was not bad. Going to synagogue and whatnot when I was much younger, but nowadays, so anyways, but. And English does have Pascha. You can say Pascha. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that in a conversation. That people are going to say Easter, of course. So there is a little sense, though. Okay, the one thing I do see, there's this common meme actually, which I thought about putting up here, which is like says like this is Ishtar, and this is like her holy symbols, and she's the goddess of this. And that's where Easter comes from, essentially. Which, if I remember correctly, nothing in that meme is correct. It's supposed to be like one of those informational memes, but kind of like a gotcha. Nothing is correct. Besides, the name Ishtar is a goddess in some Middle Eastern context, but she is not the goddess. That is not her domain of whatever it says she is, and her holy symbols are not the egg and the hair. We do have this, though. So Easter is named after an Anglo-Saxon pre-Christianization goddess, okay? But it doesn't really make much sense for Bede to make this goddess up. But Bede is really the only person who mentions this at all, actually, in the Anglo-Saxon sources. Well, in the 19th century and kind of continuing in the 21st, you have people that obsess over this idea. Right? They try to peel back the Christianized version of the stuff, which is really mostly what we're getting written down anyways. As there's hardly any literacy in Germanic societies before Christianization. And they want to peel it back and find the uncorrupted, idea of like some pagan thing, right? Which often doesn't work very well, and you also miss out on a lot of stuff, right? Because and you're also just getting it through a really different lens, anyhow, right? When I'm looking at Snorri Sturluson, sorry, his prose edda, right? He explains away how these gods that his ancestors believed were gods, they're really just Trojans, right? It's like some Brutus of Troy, like coming in to find London or whatever, right? So it's a very different lens. You can't really get rid of it completely. I mean, you can get hints, and some of the stuff is obviously pagan, right? And we can make up some, or not make up, but to do some ideas about Easter. But if you really want a lot, and I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but if you really want really good, like the information, all of it pretty much in one place, and you want some very good academic thought put behind it, and to get it very thoroughly explained and exhausted pretty much, you want to check out this book right here I have on the screen, Easter, a Pagan Goddess, a Christian Holiday, and Their Contested History by Richard Sermon. This was put out by Uppsala Books very recently, I think within the last year. I have a copy. It's not in hand right now. It's in the other room, but very good book, very easy to read. Lots of interesting information. So, but pretty much, this is Easter as a goddess or Eostra, right? Is likely not a pan-Germanic deity, probably a local cult, maybe like local to Kent area, some area in Kent. The idea of eggs on Easter is a late medieval thing, and the hare is from the modern period, so they came later. They're not in this Anglo-Saxon period at all, right? When we would have had Easter. So an earlier thing, right? Just like midwinter was for Christmas, attached, right? It's not really pagan, right? So the only thing pagan about modern Easter, though, then is its name, right? And really, again, this is only really in English, as Pascha is used pretty much everywhere else. You do have that old High German, unattested, I might say, Ostara, and I believe from not even the nominative version of it, you get the modern German Ostern, which is the word for Easter. This may be because of the conversion, though, as Anglo-Saxon missionaries were key there, and the Anglo-Saxon missionaries would have called Easter, right, and not Pascha. So this idea of, oh, the Germans have this Ostara, right, which I do believe is one of the Wiccan Sabbats is named Ostara after this idea, is a lot of conjecture, right? Because again, in the 19th century, these romantic philologists or even comparative mythologists, they want it pretty much to be a pan-Germanic thing. That sounds neat to them, I guess. So there's not really much evidence for that at all. I mean, it could have been, I guess, but not a lot of evidence. So again, see this book I have up on the screen. If anyone is interested in Easter and this question, this is going to give you a lot of information, a lot of detail. And so then, is it a pagan holiday? We kind of already touched on this. So this is from Eleanor Parker's Winters in the World. Again, I look at this book almost every one of these lectures. Again, another book I think that is useful, that really goes along with the liturgical calendar in the Anglo-Saxon context. So again, this is from her book. The English name Easter is an outlier here. Where did it come from? Bede is the only Anglo-Saxon writer to attempt to answer that question. He does so in a short chapter about the English months, discussing the Anglo-Saxon name for April, Easter Monath. He says that this month has a name which is now translated Paschal month, which was once called after a goddess of theirs named Eostra, in whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month. Now they designate that Paschal season by her name, calling the joys of the new rite by the time-honored name of the old observance. This is all he or any other Anglo-Saxon source tells us about a goddess called Eostra, but this brief passage has caused much debate. In the 19th century, scholars of comparative mythology, most influentially Jakob Grimm, use Bede's evidence in some German analogs, including a hypothetical goddess Ostara, who is not attested in medieval sources, to argue that Eostra may have been a pan-Germanic goddess, perhaps of spring or the dawn, based on the timing of Easter Monath and its etymological link with the words relating to east. So then we continue with Eleanor's description. Here she says, so how was Easter celebrated in Anglo-Saxon England? In 877, a law code of Alfred the Great ruled that laborers should be freed from work for the whole week before and the week after Easter, the longest holiday in the year. And though Ælfric refers to these branches as palm wiku, real palms are, of course, not easy to obtain in England, so this is for Palm Sunday. Specifically, so they probably carry branches of pussy willow or yew, the traditional substitutes for Palm Sunday palms in Britain until the 20th century. Ælfric notes that the preaching was not permitted on the last 3 days of Holy Week, and he calls these the silent days, svikdagas. The rituals of these days were left to speak for themselves, impressed on the imagination of participants without the mediation of a preacher. They were meant to take the congregation in mind and heart directly to the time of Christ's Passion, to live again through the last days of his life and experience first the desolation of his death, then the joy of his resurrection. It was a yearly journey from mourning to celebration, experienced communally and through shared ritual, yet often in outward silence. I think this idea of shared ritual is pretty important in the medieval, especially early medieval context. It's very important now. We just don't tend to think in this sense, I think, but religiously it is still very important. And you do have community, it is still very important. And if you think in any way as an anthropologist, it is important too. Again, that is Winters in the World, a journey through the Anglo-Saxon year. Highly worth checking out. So again, I just want to mention a few things, and then we're going to get into the words. And we're actually going to look a little bit at Good Friday, kind of supplementary material, as well as the Saturday before Easter Sunday and after Good Friday, whatever. I guess Holy Saturday, but whatever that is. But specifically, we're going to look at the very popular medieval motif of the harrowing of hell, because that is a thing you shouldn't really skip over when you're looking at early medieval Easter. So we do have the Synod of Whitby, which was in the year 663 or 664 in Strennos-Hall, Northumbria, at the double monastery. Double monasteries are, there's one monastery for monks and one monastery for minches or nuns, which had Saint Hilda as abbess. I believe they would have church together is how they worked exactly. So Saint Hilda or Hild was related to Northumbrian royalty, actually. So Strennos-Hall later became known as Whitterburg, which is modern Whitby. So Whitterburg actually is from Old Norse, so you can tell this B ending, it means there's a Norse settlement as far as like indicating modern English toponymy. And so I looked at this, I was like, Synod of Whitby, okay, I was wondering about that, and I was like, okay, that's certainly a later name, so I didn't know it was Strennos-Hall before I looked it up. But so this synod, in some sense, normally gets some attention when you're reading like Anglo-Saxon stuff. In some sense, it's maybe not the most important. Northumbria was the power of the Anglo-Saxon petty kingdoms at the time. Northumbria was the big one, pretty much, but not the only one, right? And they're not a combined England, and they're not going to be for a while still, a couple more centuries at least. So why we look at this one? Well, it does do a couple interesting things, especially when you're considering that it is in the northern part of England. So pretty much, for those unaware, when you have the conversion of England, and there's a book I have actually is called The Conversion of Anglo-Saxon England. My buddy Sean gave it me, and it's way over there, but I wish I could, pull it over here telekinetically and show it to you, but because I forget who wrote it. But pretty much you have two missions going into the Anglo-Saxon portions of Britain, right? So England, essentially, right? So you have a big, after the Romans withdraw from Britain, there's a huge population decrease, okay? And the eastern part of England in particular seems to have been heavy hit, and Christianity doesn't seem to do very well in those parts after this population decline. And as these Anglos and Saxons and Frisians and Yachts and Jutes and whatnot are all moving in, right? They're not doing, it doesn't handle it great. So pretty much though, is from the west and the north, those people are still Christian, actually. They're largely Christian. Rome was Christianized, had been Christianized for 100 years solidly, by the time these Anglo-Saxons start coming in and the Romans have withdrawn. You read something like Bernard Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles, and it's very ahistorical in how it treats Christianity. But so you have that influence from the west and the north. So kind of like, for example, when Hwicha becomes like a political entity, it's an Anglo-Saxon entity, or at least it's ruled by these Anglo-Saxons, or you would, I guess, specifically Saxons, actually. But they're Christian. It actually starts out as Christian, and then that might be because of the populace would have helped in the conversion of these new elites that can't have come in to rule, in a sense. And at the time, maybe Brythonic would have still been like some ancestor to Welsh, or something related to Welsh, would have still been spoken largely in Hwicha, but the people in charge would have been speaking English. And eventually, of course, through this process of assimilation, English is going to win out. In England, of course, generally actually pretty quickly, though in some places like Cambria, it takes a little longer, right? But otherwise, what I'm trying to say, though, is that you have a mission from the south as well. And you have the mission of Augustine of Canterbury. He's been sent by the Roman Church to go and convert the Anglo-Saxons. And that happens, right? So pretty much this synod puts Northumbria, again, which is in the north, so mostly has a Celtic church type of like organization and stuff going on, right? This double monastery, for example, would have been in the Celtic fashion and not a continental fashion. And you have pretty much at this time also, though, a lot of people are already leaning Roman, even in the Celtic places. The only place, as far as I'm aware, that would be more isolated would be like Iona, but it's still interesting. And this is, I think, in part that relatively peaceful conversion that England has in the early Middle Ages, right? Is this as well, right? This is just a peaceful thing that happens, and pretty much you had the problem actually in Northumbria, which is explained in that Richard Sermon book, where you had two datings of Easter, right? And whether or not you would count like the day the moon actually fell on, and so you pretty much you'd be counting Easter differently. And so some years actually would fall on the same day, many years it wouldn't. And so, for example, I believe it's the king of Northumbria follows the Celtic dating, and his queen, who is from somewhere further south, follows the Roman dating, and so they're celebrating Easter on different days. And so they decide it might be reversed, but I'm pretty sure that's how it was. So they decide pretty much that they're going to follow the Roman dating of Easter, and they're also going to follow the Roman tonsure as opposed to the Celtic tonsure, which we're not even sure exactly what that looked like. It's probably taken from like your sideburns type of area, like your temple area, and shaved this way rather than having that bald like circle in the middle of your head from your crown. But there's a few, and I don't think I've ever seen a depiction of it. I don't think I've seen ever an artist depict this Celtic tonsure or what it may have looked like. I guess it's really not a popular subject. So, but pretty much it is kind of important in that sense, and it does give you some background. So then now we're going to look at some words here, and then we're going to get into some supplementary stuff. It's all in Old English. Well, it's all in English this time. No Old Saxon this time. I think next time, depending on what I'm able to get together, it might do a little bit Old Frisian. But here's what we got. So we got through and thrich. Some of these words I mostly just pull out because, one, they look familiar, and I want to show you if they are or not. And then these other words just don't really have like cognates in modern English, or if they do, they're like very, very obscure. And oftentimes, as you probably are aware, I tell you these obscure stuff, and we'll get a little bit into that later. But through is a channel for water, broadly, so a pipe more specifically. But in this case, it is a coffin or a tomb. More specifically, it's a tomb. There's no sense that Jesus would have been buried in a coffin like thing, just tomb, sepulcher, that type of thing. So then we also have earthstirring, which is an earth stirring, quite literally, so an earthquake. We also have a synonym in Old English, earthbervung, which is not used by Ælfric here, but it just means earth shaking. And then you have raf, which is armor, raiment, garment, robe, vestment, booty, plunder, or spoil. It's really this raiment, garment meaning here, denotation. In the homily, you also have selon, which is a verb. It means to give, way more popular than it means to sell. Because it does mean to sell, and that's where we get the word sell. It can mean give up for money, or betray as well. But it normally has this give sense and not sell sense, which I believe we looked at last lecture, which was chepion or whatever. That normally means to sell. And then you have grapion, which is to touch with hands, or literally to grope. And you have hicht or hicht, which looks like some other words, which is why I wanted to mention it, because it means hope or joy or expectation. I believe you can spell this out in modern English as hight, and it will mean something like hopefulness. I've never seen it used in that sense, but I think you get away with it if you wanted to. And then you also have ocha, which is horror or terror. And again, does not survive into modern English. And so an interesting one, I just thought worth sharing. So then another thing that I noticed when I was translating this is that you have the word worse show up, if I'm remembering correctly. And so in Old English, the comparative of evil, which is evil, of course, is wirsa, which is worse, right? Obviously. And the superlative is werest, which is worst. And then in modern English, we have worse and worst, right? And these are the comparative and superlative, respectively, of bad, but not evil, right? So you do actually have like badder and baddest are words, actually, or they were. They were popular for a few centuries. And the modern comparative and superlative, so worse and worst, won out in the 1700s. pretty much replacing this sense of evil. You do see evil in like a more archaic sense in older texts. You'll see evil to being something like bad, right? And we hardly ever use the word evil in such a just normal conversational way ever now. But the word bad doesn't really actually show up in Old English, though. So you have evil, but you don't really have the word bad. So it's not quite clear where this is coming from. So it is likely from Old English, though. It could be from Norse influence. It could be coming from some Norse word. There is an argument that it could come from Old English bad del, which means hermaphrodite, stuff along like that, like a effeminate man or whatever. Which could have just lost this ending of L, right? Like compared to Michel in Winchell, which are our modern words much and winch, respectively. And it does seem to be related, like where badel is seemingly related to badan, which is to defile. And so it seems like you could probably get bad potentially from that. I think there's probably more you could look into there. Just wanted to point that out. But also on a related note, we don't really look at this. You do see the word good actually show up quite a bit, but we're pretty used to this now. There's not really a change here. Good, better, best was the same thing in Old English as it is now. The words are different. It's good instead of good, right? For example, but good originates in Germanic and Proto-Germanic specifically as godas, and this adjective actually has a synonym, batas, of which the comparative, right, and the superlative, better and best, come from, right? Okay, so you'd have batas, and then you have the comparative superlative of batas is better and best, right? Instead of gooder and goodest. Presumably, you would have had a superlative and comparative for good as something like gooder and goodest, and you could say gooder and goodest. These are English words; they're just considered informal. Of course, better and best are also the comparative superlative for the adverb welas, which means well and old, or Proto-Germanic. So, and where we get the word well. So, but yeah, so interesting. I think this seems like maybe it didn't even survive in Proto-Germanic as a word, batas, right, for good. Maybe just a comparative and superlative has survived at this point, even. So, batas could be a non-existent actual word in Proto-Germanic. All right, then we have dadbot. So this is a deed boat, or bot, which is a deed, help, assistance, remedy, amends, recompense, and is related actually to batas, which we just talked about. But this would be from Proto-Germanic boto. I wanted to mention this one because I think the word boat, which I think does survive in the modern English word boot, not the normal boot like the one you put on your shoe, and also the more learned borrowing of bote, B-O-T-E, so modern English speakers know how to say it. But Æcrebot is like an interesting charm prayer, kind of, for your field, Æcrebot, field remedy, pretty much, field cure, or whatever, is what it means. You can read it at this website, Weirty, which is now only on the web archive, really. But I won't open it here because we don't really have a chance to look at it. But if you are interested, there's, for example, there's an interesting chant in there that doesn't really survive anywhere else. And, there's not a lot of information on what it means, just guesses. So one of those philological conundrums and fun to look at type of things. I will try to remember, and if I don't, someone just remind me to put this link in the description so you can go and look at it if you want. Because when you just look up Æcrebot, pretty much nothing pops up. So I don't remember how I found this, but I found this a while ago. And so, yes. So then we have Old English crosswords. I wanted to mention if you went through the homily yourself, or if you just were listening to my reading of it and looking, the most popular word for cross is rood. Okay. And it's actually where the modern word rude comes from, and the modern word rod, as in like a measurement, comes from as well. And there is a fantastic article. I think it was in some anthology somewhere, but Rolf Bremer, who's like the premier old Frisian scholar for the English-speaking world, at least. If you have the Old English, the Introduction to Old Frisian, for example, the grammar, it's written by Brunner as well. So very well-respected philologist here. And he goes over all these Old English words for cross in this article. Again, you can just look it up. I think it's available on academia.edu, which has a lot of great essays just freely available for you. But so if you just look this up, he's going to go more into detail of it. And it's a very good article. I highly recommend you read it. It gives you an idea of not just normal words like road, also like maybe like, does the word cross even exist in Old English, or is it more of just Latin, right? And at that point, but here's the closing statement, which I felt was very appropriate. It made me think, and I hope it makes you think as well. So the closing statement is thus: a saying has it that a child that is loved has many names. There is truth in this popular wisdom. The Anglo-Saxons must have loved the cross and what it represented, Christ's act of redeeming mankind. Whether the fact that present-day English today possesses only one current word, cross, is indicative of the depth of love for what the cross represents today is something I would rather leave the reader to decide. I mean, there's actually a chart right at the very end of his article showing the examples of these Old English crosswords, and it's a pretty big chart, right? Some of them maybe you could combine into one if you really wanted to, or right, two you can combine into one or whatever. But there's a lot more words than just cross, and really that's the only word we use. Maybe in like some highly poetic sense, we'll use something else, right? Like tree, maybe. But not really these days at all. So again, highly recommend going and checking out that if you are interested. That is kind of like secondary material in some sense. I really like to look at the primary material. I think that's very useful, especially when you're getting into something like philology. But also to supplement it with secondary material, I find very useful as well. Okay. So let's talk about money real quick, because this does come up in the homily. So we have shot. Yeah, shot. So this can mean just wealth, money, coin in particular. And this is pretty much type of silver penny, pretty common in the Anglo-Saxon period. I mean, I remember when I took my general humanities classes, and where they largely skip over the Middle Ages anyways, they like to act like there's like no coinage in the early Middle Ages, and that's not true. So like you have a lot of silver pennies, and you have a lot of series of them. You have the series K, which is from Kent, E from Frisia, C from East Anglia, H from Wessex, S from Essex, X from Denmark. So the shots, for example, are pretty widespread actually in this more culturally aligned region. So for example, you have this series K over here on the right, on the upper right, which is from 720 to 740 AD. This is from Kent then, and it has this face, of course, and seemingly a wolf-headed serpent on the right. Very interesting. And then, but I wanted to compare that. This does not come up actually in Ælfric, but I think if you want to know about shots, then you should know about thrimsa as well, which are gold shillings. They actually stopped being produced in the late 7th century, so they're more early period, not later or even middle period really at all. And they are largely replaced by the shot. So 4 silver shotas was considered a thrimsa later. But here is an example of one. Interesting with the handshakes. They're much more, I would say, late antique type of design there. But it is an interesting. This one is from England, I believe, as well. So, okay. Let's go from there. So then we have this idea of lithe summers. Okay, I wanted to talk about this. So while lithe now means slim or flexible, it does have an obsolete sense still, actually, in English, modern English, of mildness or calm. The word lithe, then, and this meaning as well, this mildness and calm meaning, comes from the Old English litha, which is gentle or mild or pleasant. And it's cognate to Latin lentus, which has many meanings, but can mean flexible or pliant is one of them. And you can see the relation in that sense. Lithe also has an association with summer, though, in the Anglo-Saxon period, as June and July were actually named Litha. And it is from this, actually, where if you read like Tolkien stuff, The Hobbit, and their Hobbit calendar, they have lithe days. And these are around midsummer, right? Remember, we talked about this before, but summer in the Anglo-Saxon period would have started on May the 7th, which is actually the day after, I think, probably this will come out. So, or maybe it's May the 6th. So pretty much this is the start of summer now in the Anglo-Saxon period. So midsummer, as it is late in June now. That's actually the start of summer, or at least in the United States. That would have actually been considered the middle of summer at the time. So it makes sense why we call it midsummer. This is, so Lithe days are like pretty much around midsummer, and their months are then for Lithe in the midsummer area, and then you have after Lithe, and then you have, which it's really air Lithe in Old English, and then there's literally after Lithe in Old English. Well, these summer, these months, right? So June is air Lithe, after Lithe is July, and then between days actually is where the leap year day would go, right? This inserted extra day is around the summer solstice, which seems very appropriate considering it's like the sun is, you get more sun, but really you're not. It's just the year doesn't work exactly. We talked about the calendar back in my shorter extra Christmas video actually, and how that leap year stuff kind of works. But this Lithe is actually then kind of like Ostara, comes from this hypothetical for the Wiccan Sabbats. The Wiccan Sabbat Litha gets its name from this Old English calendar, pretty much, of Litha. So, which is interesting, I think. And then also, just to mention, though, that the name for summer itself, the season is Sumor. But again, Lithe does seem to be a word heavily associated with summer. So, maybe like the time where the seas would be calmer and you get more trade, more passage, just lots more warmth as well in the country. So then we have Passover and death. Again, I want to mention this really quickly because Fadeld actually doesn't really come up in the homily, but again, it's one thing. It is a journeying, pretty much. That's what like fare, like I'm faring somewhere, right? And we don't really say that in modern English anymore, but it means, so Fadeld is a passing over, right? It's a journey, really, right? And Fadeld can mean Passover. Again, that's related to Easter, but doesn't actually, never denotes Easter itself. So Fadeld is pretty strictly Passover, not Easter, but related, of course, just like Pascha. And so then we also have fourth Fadan here. So fourth fare means to fare forth. I think that's how we normally say it in modern English, but means to depart or leave, right? Makes a lot of sense. I think that's pretty clear to a modern English speaker. But it's a rather poetic or euphemistic way, actually, of saying to die as well, which is pretty normal. Okay, a lot of these words, it's pretty normal to euphemize something like dying, actually. So, for example, like sweven, right? It's a normal way to say to die in Old English. It literally means to dream, but means to die, almost always in a poetic sense, right? And so it's hard to tell, and that word doesn't survive really in modern English anyways either. Besides, the sweven could still be in dream or like vision or whatever. But then also you even have it like further back than that we even still have examples of. For example, the word murder is related to French word mort, from the Latin word for death, of course. And one of the ways we can actually date like these Indo-European breakoffs is based off of the meaning of these words, essentially, right? So we know like Tocharian was pretty early, actually, because there's a certain word that means something like stone, I believe, in other Indo-European words and languages, but it means something similar, but not quite stone. And it shows us, based off some other evidence as well, that Tocharian was probably a pretty early breakoff. But the earliest breakoff of Indo-European, as far as we can tell, is Anatolian, which would be languages like Hittite, which are related to English. And they have a verb merzi, right? Okay, and it is related to the word like murder, and it doesn't mean to die though, okay, or it doesn't mean to be killed either. It just means to disappear, right? So we're gonna say they disappeared, right? They didn't die; they just disappeared. So in this case, they fared forth, right? And I believe fared forth is, or forth faden, or something of the type is used actually in Ælfric's homily here. So then again, another one I wanted to mention, Dun Arrakis, hilly place. So Old English dun actually does denote a hill or a mountain, and is where the modern word dune comes from. This could come from a West Germanic dunu, which looking at English sister languages implies a sandy hill. It doesn't have that in Old English. Interestingly, it just means hill or mountain in Old English. It doesn't have this sandy like description to it. But there also is a semblance, seemingly to Proto-Celtic dunum, which means stronghold, rampart. You can look at Dinadin, right, which is the Brythonic name for Edinburgh, right? So din is replaced by burg, and from Old English burg, right? So, but that doesn't seem very likely, right? As a Brythonic, then, as you can see with the din, actually, it doesn't have an oo at all. It has an I. It is retained in Gaelic, but at the time this would have come into English, that wouldn't come from Gaelic. It would be coming from Brythonic, and the sound change just is pretty much untenable. It just wouldn't work. And so, like Scottish Gaelic, for example, is a descendant of Old Irish. The modern Scots are kind of like a mix of Picts and the Scots. The tribe itself, the Scoti, is actually from Ireland. So the Picts would have been more native, and then you'd have in the north, and then you'd have in the lowlands, you'd have more like the people that would be speaking Cambrian, right? So they'd be speaking a Brythonic dialects, which are more like Welsh, right? So, and while related to Gaelic or Gaelic, or whatever, not the same, essentially. So, Brythonic would have been more like the language of Arthur, for example, if you lived in not Gaelic. So, pretty much, again, dun means hill, mountain. It does seem to mean sandy place in other older West Germanic languages than it does now in modern English. We don't say dune for just a hill, any old hill. Mentioned, I believe this one, it does come up in the homily as well. I wrote this slide down a while ago, so I'm not even sure. But which is actually normally so with the thorn, I believe, in might just be thorn normally, but it means wave. And we also have home. I just wanted to mention home. It's actually how you spell it in Old English. Modern English, home, which modern English home actually means like small isle, pretty much, which mostly is coming from this Old Norse influence, actually, of hormur, which means small isle or ayat. But the word itself is in Old English. It just doesn't mean water in modern English. They are associated with water in a sense, right? But not quite. And so Old English, ayat actually does come from eoth, which this ia or e is actually the first part of the island, which has a needless s in there. But it is actually this home is related. It's cognate to Latin culmen, which is where we get the word culminate from. So. Okay, and then now we're close to getting to the supplementary material. Don't worry. So we have, and we are going to get into a little bit of codicology today as well. So we have manifold, monfold deeds. So I think this is a good test. I think if you're paying attention, it doesn't help a lot in some sense when we're reading this late West Saxon stuff, which does have a tendency. For example, they use a lot more eths than they use thorns. But if you look at earlier manuscripts, and the script they would use then, if you're like a paleography expert or whatever, you can tell that the eth looked a lot more like a D, and so thorn was a bit more common. But when you get later on, scripts change, so the eth and the D don't look so similar, so you'll see more eths over thorns, stuff like that. But also the Y, which is really not rounded in the late Old English period, can be used where oftentimes you just have an I, and then because I and Y don't actually make the same sound in the earlier Old English period. Right, an I would make an E sound, and a Y would make an E sound, which are really close, but the Y is rounded, right? So you pretty much already lost that in the late Old English period, which is when these Ælfric homilies are coming, and it's pretty late. So, and you can even see how Ælfric's language, if you read, I would like to show it sometime, actually. I can see if I can get something to work in supplement to a different homily, but how Ælfric's West Saxon dialect, how that even changes by vocabulary and by some spelling with Ælfric's. But anyway, so monful in Middle English, I'm going to mention that, is compound of man, because this helps meaning person again, or man, and full. So it means noble, brave, strong, and literally it's manly, right? It's full of man. But in Old English, though, there was a word spelled exactly the same. Manful, right? Normally with the one L, but I think it's double L in Harrowing. But the compound in Old English man is not man or mana. Proto-Germanic has a really confusing, we're not exactly even sure what the word man would be. Gothic points to one thing, and Old English rarely does when you have the nominative singular as mana as opposed to man. Note though, and I think that's the important thing, the Old English man, and you have man. Man, man. That's the gemination of the N, right? So it's doubled. They're really hard for a modern English to point out. We don't really think about these doubled consonants. You'd say these double consonants. So in this sense, you'd really just say the N a bit more longer. So, but you'll note though, it's not Old English man as in person or man. It's man, just one N, right? Which actually, confusingly, man, mon, can be spelled with just one N sometimes, especially in the later period. So that does confuse us a little bit. But man, we're just going to look strictly at man, which is one N, means crime. It means sin. It means wickedness. Okay, and it comes from a Proto-Germanic mina, and it is related to mean, actually, a little further down this pipeline of meaning, I guess. You go further back up and then you get to mean, right? Like I meant this, right? Like not like this person's mean to me, right? It's just the verb to mean, right? And it does actually survive in modern English to the word manswear, which means to swear falsely, right? So if you ever want to sound fancy, say manswear, I guess. So though if manswear survived in such a mon, not as like monswear or whatever, is what I kind of expect, but you could probably say manful still, actually. It'd still be the same thing. That would be full of crime, kind of, or wickedness. So don't do manful deeds. So anyways, we're going to get to our first supplement here. This is the longest. The next two, I have 3 things to supplement, well, 4 kind of to supplement you with. And this is the longest one. So let us get through this. 5 kind of? No. Okay. I went overboard. I actually cut back a lot of the stuff I was going to share. And I wanted to give you opportunity essentially to have homework, if you would. Not really. It's not like it's class. I could grade it if you want, in a sense, if I could find the time. But pretty much, I'm going to give you some of this, and you can go and do the rest if you want. So the first one we're going to look at is the Dream of the Rood, or Dream of the Rood, it's normally called, and where to read it. Actually, so you could read it. One thing I would actually highly recommend, you can get separate versions of this, right? Like Dickens and Ross edition of the poem is a pretty good one. But you can also, I would just highly recommend Pope, who Folk went back, both are great scholars. Folk went back and he added an 8, so I believe Pope did 7. But you can actually find The Dream of the Rood. In here, it's going to start you with Cadman's Hymn. I'm assuming maybe if you're here, you're already pretty familiar with Old English. Maybe not, though. Old English prose is considerably easier to read than the poetry. So if you want the more difficult stuff and to be taken slowly through and into it, it's going to start you off with like the most simple thing, right? Cadman's Hymn. That's it. It's 9 lines. So, but it does get you through Dream of the Rood as well, and there is commentary for each poem, and it is very just worthwhile, I'd say. I have a couple bookmarks going on in here, so and good poetry altogether anyways. So the Dream of the Rood is 156 lines. We're actually going to look at this again in a second. And it is normally divided into 3 parts, lines 1 through 27, 28 to 121, 122 to 156. I think it's interesting to see that you'll have different like ideas about how you should edit these, like critically edit these poems, right? And I would say there's actually a really good argument here that is maybe not even dividing into 3 parts. This is actually just 2 poems put together, actually. And there's a corruption in lines 75 to 77, which we'll look at, and beginning in line 78, then according to metrical and lexical evidence indicating that lines 78 through 156 were composed by a later poet, says Leonard Nydorf, who was a great scholar. I looked at 3 of his articles before putting this together. But here are a couple of them, actually. The textual condition of the Dream of the Rood, lines 75 to 77, and the composite authorship of the Dream of the Rood. So this is kind of an older idea, actually, not new. I believe it's from the late 19th century. But the idea that is two texts kind of put together for some reason. We're going to kind of look at that as the Dream of the Rood does actually survive in two sources, pretty much, sort of. So, but one big thing, and again, we're going to look at this as well, that there's no hypermetric lines from 79 and onward, but there are several hypermetric sections or just lines in the earlier part of the poem. And the hypermetric stuff seems to be the earlier stuff. Okay, so because, well, it just happens more so in the earlier period anyways, when these poetry rules seem to be kind of more prevalent in a sense. But so, and also hypermetric actually works really well. Like it gives you all the meter rules you need to follow, but also it's pithier in a sense, and so which is actually preferred. But Nydorf, much more than I, or someone like Nelson Gehring, for example, are really, really well tuned. Find even Folk, actually, he's got an introduction to Old English and meter. It's a great book that really goes into detail on the poetics of Old English, like literary verse. Really complicated. I find it personally really complicated. It is a little bit more difficult for me, but again, recommend. Also, I have these links here if you would like. We're going to look at the second one, the second link, a little bit more soon, but these will get you to versions of the poem. I believe also that big poetry website, I'm forgetting what it's called, so I'm just going to look it up. Poetry Foundation. If you click on that, actually you can find two versions of the poem. And what it's going to be is it's going to be Roy Imluza, who is doing the Bartnoaks Ælfric, but he'll have a translation, and if you click on the other version, there's the Old English as well. I probably Leo's editing of it. I haven't actually checked his version of it to see what he puts different lines as. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, what each swevna kist sejan wheela, what mei machta, to midranikta, Tithan reodberen restavunedon, Thuta methat ich jesawa, silitra treoa, on lift ladan, leuchta bewunden, Bama bertost, Arthat backen was, bechoten mit golda, Gimas stodon, Faira at foldan schatten, surcha thar fiva waron, op thama axleie spana, Becheldon thar enger dristnes ala, Faira thur forti shaft, ne was thar huru frakodas yaga. So anyways, so we have Quat, which is this call. Again, we kind of talked about this, but listen kind of in this sense. So I will speak of the choicest dreams. Okay. Swevna, I mentioned that a minute ago. It means dream here. What I dreamt in the middle of the night. So what, again, the manuscript actually lacks the W, so that's why I put it in brackets here. And so middle of the night. After speech bearers lived in rest. So you have Reod and the bear, and so the bearer's speech, Reod. And Sithan. Okay. Me thought that I saw a most marvelous tree. So Treo is tree. Me that I saw thought me that I saw marvelous tree. In the air conducted round with light, brightest of beams. All that beacon was covered with gold. Jim stood fair at the earth's corners. Also there were 5 up on the crossbeam. Behold, there are all the angels of the Lord. Fair through all creation. That was certainly not a felon's gallows. I'm not sure I have axle. It kind of mean shoulder as well. Actually, so crossbeam here is a fine translation. I think it gets the point across, at least to a modern English speaker. And that is where the word axle comes from. Yeah, so I think this is pretty straightforward. Good poetry, though. This is where actually the brightest of beams, Bama, Treoa, this can mean cross in a sense. Then we have Ak hina thar becheldon, Harja gastis, men over moldan, und Artheos mara i schaft. Dilich was sei siabam, und ich sinem fach, Forwunded mid womum, besag ich uldres treo, warum I werthoda, winam shinan, ye yirid mid golda, gimas, havdon, beriana werdlicha, warodindes treo, quadra ich dur that gold on yitan machte, amra Arjewin that hit arrest ungan, swatan on tha swithran halva, alich was mid sorium yedrevid. But holy spirits beheld him there, men over the earth and all this splendid creation. Wondrous was the victory tree. So Sia is like actually like the German Z Heil Sia is related, or like Sigmund, the name Sigmund, and stained with sins. Sins, you can see, is pretty obvious. Severely wounded with impurity, I saw the tree of glory. And esteemed in weeds. So in this case, I just went with like clothing, right? It's esteemed in this clothing, shining with joy, or joys. Winum, as in the word win, the rune win makes the W sound, or Aowin, and which means horse joy, from Lord of the Rings. Equipped with gold, gems had covered worthily the master's tree. Yet through that gold I was able to recognize the wretched ancient conflict when it first began to bleed on the right side. I was all with sorrows afflicted. Give you a second to look at that. We'll go on. Ort ich was for Thara, fagran jesitha. Jesag ich dat fusa baken. Winden warm on bleum. Huilam hit was mid watan bestemmed. Beswilled mid swatis ganga. Huilam mid sinka ye jirwed. Quadra ich thar legenda. Langa huila. Beheld chari. Halendas treo. Och that ich ye hirid, that hit chleothroda. Ungan tha word sprekan uru celesta. That was yaru iu. Each that gita or ita yeman. That each was acheowen. Hotis on enda. Astired of stevnaminum. Ye naman me thar stranga feondas. Fearful I was for the fair sight. I saw that eager beacon. You can see beacon here, it means sign kind of too. Change garments and colors. Now it was with fluid soaked. Wet. It was with wet, kind of, or like moisture. Soiled with the going of blood. Now with treasure equipped. So blood is literally sweat here. It definitely seems to have the meaning of blood, not just sweat. Yet I laying there a long while, beheld in rue cherry, so the sorrowful tree of the healer. It's literally rue cherry, if you know the modern English words that neither are very common these days, I guess. So, tree of the healer, until I heard it make a sound, began to speak words, the best of woods. That was once long ago. I still remember it. This is superlative best, right? That I was hewn from the holt's edge, removed from my stem. Strong enemies seized me there. So fiends, enemies, seize in this case. So stronger. Ye worked on him thought or water sinna. Hitan me hura werkas heban. Baron me thar beronas on axlum. Och that here me on berk asseton. Ye fastnodon me thar feondos in noia. Ye sag ich da fran mankinas. Estan eron michla. Dat he me wolda on ye stigan. Thar ich da ne dorsta. Overdrichtnes word. Buchan oder berstan. Dat ich bidian ye sag. Erfan shatas. Ala ich micht. Feondas ye filan. Quadra ich fasta stod. On yerede hinatha jung haleth. Hat was gold al michti. Strong on stidmod. Ye stach heon gargan hana. Made me their spectacle, ordered me to lift their criminals. Warriors bore me on their shoulders, until they set me on a hill. On a hill, Bear in this case, and Baroness is the warriors, like Beorn and the Hobbit. Enough enemies there fastened me. Then I saw the Lord of Mankind. So Thran is like it's like Freyr actually in Old Norse, so it means this Lord title. hastened with great courage, that he wished to climb upon me. There I then dared not against the word of the Lord. So drichten, again, so driftness is a genitive, bow or break, burst literally. When I saw the corners of the earth tremble, I might have felled all the foes, yet I stood fast. Then the young hero made ready. Onyirid hina young halith. Halith would be like health in modern English. I've never seen it. That was God Almighty. Strong and stern, he ascended on the high gallows. Mori on manachra yesida. That he would mankin lisan. Vi wurde ich da me se beron im klipta. Ne dorste ich quadra buchan to erdan. Falen to foldan schatten. Ak ich schreeuwde vaste standen. Rood was ich aradet. Hof ich rich na king. Heel nog graffeld. Heel dan mene dorsta. Vordriven he me, I can't read that. Niet der kan nylem. On me sindon thador yesiana. Opena in with clemas. Ne dorsta ich hira anium shedan. Besmeradon hier butuat jardera. Al ich was mit bloda bestemmed. Begotten of thas guban sidan. Sidan, he habda his gast on sended. Fala ich on thumb berja, ibidan haba. So brave in the sight of many, when he wanted to free mankind. So free again, lisan, as in like abisen. We've seen this a bit in Ælfric's homilies. I trembled when the man embraced me. I dared not bow to the earth. Oh, wow, I have a couple spelling errors there. Sorry about that. Or fall to the earth's corners, but I had to stand fast. I was reared as a cross. So Rood again. I raised the mighty king I raised. Lord of heaven, I dare not tilt. They drove dark nails through me. On me, the scars are still visible. Open, treacherous strokes. I think, yeah, these are interesting words to look at. I dared not scathe any of them. They mocked us both together. I was with blood all drenched, flowing from the man's side after he had sent forth his spirit. Much I have endured on that hill. Oh, well, actually, I kind of want to look at this real quick. So, butu. So, butu is both, pretty much. Us both, right? So, excuse me, is us in this case, actually. So, I wanted to show you why it's not us, which is what you'd expect of the word us would be maybe here. So I'm going to switch to my other screen real quick, which is always a little obnoxious, so I apologize about that. But I want to show you, this is pretty much a cheat sheet, rather. And we're going to open this cheat sheet up, and maybe I can put this as well in the down below. If you can see this, there you go. All right, so English, Old English, actually has dual pronouns. So modern English, you have singular and you have plural, but you can have dual in Old English. You don't see them a ton, for I would think obvious reasons, but also they're just not, I guess, that popular. So you do have dual right here. If you look at the left, I think you can see my mouse. So you have wit. So you have ich, which is I, and you have we, which is we. So you have wit, which means literally we too. Okay, you have me, so me, and then unk, which is us too, and then us. Right, so this is a dual. I just wanted to point it out. That's one thing you might not have seen in Old English, that you do have duals. This is a very handy thing. Actually, it gives you the, like some of these, like to be, for example, and its complications. And then you have the strong verbs and the classes of strong verbs. You have adjectives, interrogatives, pronouns, and then nouns. And I think it's just a lot of useful information just kind of in one little area, right? Like we can look at the se, which is a little important. We'll look at later. But again, this does easily show us these duals as well. So I just want to show that to you real quick. And I'm going to go back to the slides. And again, sorry for all the switching around, but all right, so we have that. us too. Now let us continue. Right. Pradra weirda, isa ich werudu, werda gold. Thar lathanian, thistro hardon, berian mid walkman, walden des grauw. Shirna shiman, shadu for eoda. Wan under walkman, welp aurie schaft. Quidon kingas vil, Christmas on roda. Quadra thar fusa, veran coman, athla til anum, ich dat aar beheld. Sare ich was mid storia mid drevid. Na ich quadra tham sedum tohanda. Athmod erna michla, enamon here thar anmitina good. So, I mean, if it's not immediately obvious, actually, how you have two half lines in Old English literature poetry, you're going to have, you're going to have your alliteration. Actually, it's going to be on the stresses. You're not going to have your prefixes are not stressed in Old English, so it's not berion, it's berion, right? So the stress is on the ri. And so this is the alliteration, then the re, and then wo, and then a wow. But then you also have like a thorn here, thorn here, thorn here. You can't alliterate here then. So weruda, pradra, weruda, wan, woknum, weop. Right. So you can kind of see, I think, if you're paying attention, to where these alliterations are. If you have a any vowel, you can alliterate with another vowel. So, of violent events, I saw the god of hosts cruelly stretched out. Darkness is thester. It's modern English thester. You heard probably. Well, you never hear it. Maybe you know you've heard of it, of course. Darkness had covered with clouds, so Wokenham can mean sky actually, like the modern English welkin. It is often clouds. The ruler's corpse here is hara. The shining brightness, shadows went forth. Shining brightness is I love that phrase, honestly. Shadows went forth, and it's like the contrast. Shining brightness, shadows went forth. Dark under clouds, all creation wept, lamented the fall of the king. Christ was on the cross, and yet from afar came hastening nobles in unison. I beheld it all. I was afflicted sore with sorrows, yet I sank into their hands, humbly with great zeal. There they took Almighty God. I forgot why there, sorry. If you've noticed, there's one thing in this set of lines. I haven't really put the lines up for you, but this should be 51 to 60, I believe. And there's one line that if you're pretty familiar with the poem, you might notice a difference in. I'm going to point it out later. I'll give you a second to think about it if you want, but there's one line that you might have noticed a difference, particularly a half line of one of those lines. And I will tell you it is half line A. So it is the first time. All right. Anyways, a hovon, hina of tham hevian wita. Forletan meithach hinderlichas, standan stama bedriven. All each was mid stralam verwundert, alle den hier thar lim werina. Je stood on him at his liches havdum, beheld on hier thar heavenes drichten, on he hina thar huila gelesta. Mede after tham michlan jewina, on gunum him tham molden wirkan, beronas on banan jesida, kurvan hier thar of berchtan stana. Je setan hier tharon sigor, I can't speak, Walden, ongunan him thar sor leof galan. Amar on thar aventida, thar hier wolden et sidian. Mede fram tham maran theorna, reste he thar mater weroda. Quadra we thar I greotender goda huila. Lifted him from his heavy torment, the battlemen left him. So battle, Hilda in this case, Rinchas, right? So Matilda would be the Hilda, right? Hilda. Rinchas is another word for man. Standing drenched in blood, I was with the arrows or rays of light wounded. So stralam can mean arrows, literally mean rays of light as well. Being wounded with arrows, interesting thought to me. I believe this is an Anglian word though for arrows. This is not the word West Saxon dialect had for arrows. Anyways. I just wanted to point it out, but rays of light is normally how it's translated to beams in a sense. Arrows is normally how it's translated, but it can also mean rays of light. All right. They lay him there, limb weary, stood by him at his body's head. Also, I think I forgot to mention earlier, Baham which is where the modern German word Baum, right, is related, or for tree. It does mean the same actually in Old English. It can mean beam as in like a beam of light, but also beam as in like a piece of wood type of thing, right? Or it could just mean tree literally. But so it has both meanings like it does in modern English in Old English. They watched the Lord of Heaven there and rested a while there. Exhausted after the great conflict, they began to make a sepulchre for him in sight of his slayer. They carved it from bright stone. Bertonstana. They set within the rule of victory. They began to sing a dirge for him. Excuse me. Sorgleoth. So like a sad song, pretty much. Miserable in the eventide of Aventida. When they wished to journey hence, exhausted from the great king, he rested there with a small troop. However, we there weeping a long while. Wow. So you're there weeping a long while. Stodon on Stathola, Steven up Iwat. Hildridge, Horau Collada, Fire, Fair bold. Tha Usman Filan Ongan, Arla to Erdan. That was Ehrlich weird. Beldaf Usman on Beopansada, Vadra Methara Drichtnesteinas. Feondas Jefrunan, Jyriden me, Golda und Silvra. Nu thu mikt Jehiran, Haleth min se leova, that each baluwaru werk je bidan habe. Sada sorga is nu sound kumen. So this is, if you'll note, actually, is that the problem, right? That this seems like Nu Thu Mikt Yehiran is actually the beginning of that second poem that is concluding the first poem. Now, how Dream of the Rood originally ended might have ended around here. Maybe the source where this comes from, this is the Vercelli book, was messed up, and so, or whoever the scribe was looking at something, and so they decided to fill it in, or it was just another previous scribe who's going to fill it out. It does seem very likely it's two poems, though. Often you'll actually see this translated. That is kind of like throw it together, that there's missing something, but it seems pretty obvious as well that there's a lot missing. That before Friends Found, there's something missing after, there's something missing, and even on the next half line, there seems to be something missing. So it's not super easy exactly to reconstruct in a sense, but it's like a pretty hard, pretty strict looking bump in the road, in a sense. So we're pretty much going to stop there, but just real quick, I guess I forgot to read it. So stood in place, the song went up. From the battlement, the corpse grew cold. So kolida is a verb, to grow cold. The fair, a life dwelling. Then they began to fell us all to the earth. That was a terrible happening. So like weird, I guess, fate. When you put the word fate in, a lot of people get like all like, they just get obsessed with the fatalism idea, and so weird happening event, kind of fate, I guess. They dug for us a deep pit, yet the Lord's thanes, friends found, adorned me with gold and silver. Now you can hear, my beloved hero, that I have endured the work of criminals, sore sorrows. Now the time has come, and then just cut it off there, pretty much. But we'll look at that actually in a second. We're going to do this. Ta-da! You can't see it yet, but I can see it. So we're going to talk about the Ruthwell Cross next, but real quick, I wanted to go over this codicology section. So we're going to go into the Vercelli book, which on 104b, the folio there, conveniently starts us actually at this poem, Dream of the Rood. But we're going to go a couple pages further in, so 105R, or B, sorry, past R. If you go to line 16 down here, this conveniently, this pretty much tells us right where we were. Is nu sar kumen that me. Right? Right. So if you find that actually it's in here, let's see, because you can find pretty easily, again, that's line 16. You can see in 15 right here, the new thu, meet. So then we're going down this line, and just in the middle of this, there's very little punctuation. You can see this. So is nu sar, again, this is a long S, Kuman, interestingly, or an earlier script, so I would say a little bit more difficult. The stuff we'd been looking at previously is more of a Middle English, early Middle English, but still. Thought May. This is later though. It's not. It's pretty late only period. Where Theath Wida. Sorry. On Sida, yeah, on Sida. Men over Moldan. Let's get to the end of the line and then we can look at translating it. And all Theos Mara. Okay, so we already looked at Isnu Sarkumen earlier. But then if we look at this now, so Isnu Sarkumen means now is the time come, or is now time come, that for, well, that far and wide they will honor me. So that me will far and wide. And then it will honor me. So, and then we got the next stuff. Right, yeah. Men over Moldan and Altheos Mara. The shaft is the next word, but we end with Mara here. So, men over the earth and all this glorious creation is the next word. So, men over the earth. And the Tyrionian note for et is like really close to the words. It's a little confusing. And all this glorious sonata is like a glorious here. Yeshaft. So it's creation. Then let's see what's next. We can roll down here. We have Yeshaft. And let's right. Yebidath him. Tothrisu. Is that right? Yes, I think. Let me check over here. Yobidit him to this. Oh yes, okay. Thisum. It's doing that superscript again over the U that we saw in other manuscripts. So pretty popular practice. Thisum. Bachna. So which means and pray this sign. So Yobidit him thisum Bachna or beacon again. On me. Barn Goddess. So, on me, the Son of God. On me, Barn Goddess, so son or child of God. If you want to put son. Throda Wheela. Orthan each. Thim. Do fast. Put in fast. New is the next line. Pretty much. Not in the manuscript, as you can tell, it's not actually being divided, but it would follow these lines as they're divided into half lines, of course. Let's see, suffered a while, so throda huila a while, right? And so glorious now I. So forth on each I, and fast glorious now. All right. We got next. Let's see. Grifia under Geovenum. Again, script was no actual in there. And so turning up on each halan my. So can in a sense. So rise up under the heavens and I can heal. So and I can heal. I quirchna andra. See, Thara, the him beef. See, so a couple more words for this line actually. Oh, so that's all of them. Okay. I feel like I lost my spot. Okay, him beef. There's a lot of stuff matched together. Æcretoma. Yeah. Æcre. Is it Æcresa? Tome, which is literally looks like one word, but it's two, right? Each of those who is in awe of me, right? So of me, which is why it's confusing right there. Okay, you each was, so it's the wind, was, ye worden, vita, herdust. Once I was made into the hardest vita torment. Leodum, la is a part of a word. Yeah, lathost. Most hateful to people. Let's see. Arthan, each him. Again, looks like one word, but really two. Each him. Leave us way. So let's see. Before I opened life's way. We're almost done with this bit. We'll stop this soon. We have Richtna, ye, Yerinda, Reod, Berindum. There you go. So true way, the right way, I guess. Open for speech bearers. Berindum, Reodum, Reo. Railed Berendum. Right. So again, you can come look at this. This is the beta version. Actually, I'm not sure if they came out with a later version. I have not found it. If they have, this is a interesting. You know it's beta actually because you click on the search function and it tells you it's coming soon in 2014, which is not soon. Actually, that's the past now. So, anyways, we'll stop sharing that, and we are ready to very briefly go back to the slides again. I apologize. This is going longer than I wanted it to, but we're getting closer to that. So, all right. So the Ruthwell Cross, okay, is important in a sense. It's actually what is in the thumbnail. It is an Anglo-Saxon cross, likely from the 8th century. There are a lot of thoughts about this, but it was once part of Northumbria, but today is in Dumfriesshire, Scotland. Potentially the actual oldest text of Old English poetry, and though some think it could have been added in the 10th century. Some even think that the runes could have been added just a couple hundred years ago, right? I think that is highly unlikely. Definitely seems pretty genuine in Old English, and that is because of some of the differences. So we'll actually look at that later here in a second, but there are some differences that seem like this actually has an earlier version, an earlier text, even than the one we already went over from the Vercelli book. So this is actually very similar to Irish crosses, continuation of insular monuments. It is one of the greatest Christian monuments, actually, in Europe at the time of its creation. It's 18 feet tall, and so actually also has some of the largest Anglo-Saxon relief sculpture on it. There is some Latin text we're not going to look at today, but it has a runic text, right? And it's very similar to lines 39 through 64 of Dream of the Rood, which is why we're going to look at it. So again, you can go to this link, the Old English Poetry Facsimile project, and I'm going to share that now because I already have it open. So I'm going to start this. I'm going to open now. There it is. Okay. So you should be able to see this. This website can get really crowded really quickly, but pretty much you have on the left, you have all the Old English poetry that you can find pretty much, and you can look at it all here to your heart's desire. And then over here, you actually have what we've clicked on, and this page is pre-selected to show us the Ruthwell Cross, so this link at least. So you actually have the cross. You have the east face here. You can zoom in and look at it. You can see some of the runic inscriptions. You have this beautiful animal style relief sculpture, right? I think it's absolutely gorgeous. But you can see that here. And you can see that some of these is actually pretty hard to read. In fact, you can't really read that at all. Seems to be another description or inscription up here. But pretty much, I wanted to go over a bit of things that they have here. So it does have an example of Futhorc. The Ruthwell Cross uses an extended version of the Old English runic alphabet, likely the Northumbrian permutation, with 33 assorted runes, of which 27 occur here. So when I think we've mentioned this, I believe way back in the first lecture, actually, that you have the Elder Futhark, which we're not exactly sure where that came from. Maybe from Etruscan literatures, but you have Elder Futhark, and that pretty much helps with the sounds of Proto-Germanic. As these languages change, you have a few options, and younger Futharks, so like Viking Age runes, actually you have less characters, and so these characters make many sounds, and then in Old English you actually have more characters kind of to accommodate the expanding sounds you have, the phonemes in the language. So you can see some of those here, and again, this page is a little crowded. You can get rid of some of these pages and whatnot, but there is some useful information here, though. So notably, the carver used different runes to differentiate the palatal and the velar versions of Old English C and G. The Yivu rune, or it looks like kind of an X, is used to denote palatal G. So yeah, as in modern English, yes. While a modified version of the Yivu rune, again, you can kind of see it like a little decoration around the middle of the X, is used to denote a velar G. So G, as in modern English, gutter. Okay, the Chen rune is used to denote palatal C. So Cha, as in modern English, teach. While the Calc rune here is used to denote velar C. So Ka, as in modern English, cake. Additionally, the rune carver appears to distinguish between two versions of the velar K, using a modified rune from this before front vowels, and the usual calc rune elsewhere. Like many runic inscriptions, the Ruthwell Cross uses doubled runes. Idiosyncratically doubled runes is sometimes used to demonstrate vowel length. Right, so Richnai, powerful, and are sometimes used when a single rune would be expected. So Alnecht T. So almighty, right? On the other hand, single runes often predominate where doubled runes would be expected. So men, again, we talked about this earlier, you'd expect normally at 2 N's in for men. This edition retains such spellings in order to maintain evidence of orthographic variation common in runic inscriptions. And so this is actually from another book. And then we're just going to scroll down, and they actually give you pretty good details. So they have east face here, and they're going to show this, right? So they have a lot that's like, we're not sure, right? This is the da, right? So presumably it's wapda, right? Because it looks a lot like line 55 that we have in the Bertelli book, but you can't quite tell, right? So then you actually read these like this, top down the right side, and then you go back up, and you go down the left side. So these are divided thus, pretty much, right? So we go back up here, and we're making sure we're looking at the east face, which is this right here. And then you can see the runes. So it looks like owned probably would be here. Irida, Kina, God, Auchinlek. So and it's going to help us out here. So Irida. So then we got, let's see, this is our palatalized G. So ye, re, da, da. Yeah, it is. Sorry. Let's see, it's G, E, R, E, D. And this is the ash, I guess. Kind of difficult to see. And I think you can actually put this in it to help. Yeah, see, and that looks a lot more like an ash. It's much harder to tell without the transcription in there, though. We don't need to look at this really that strictly right now. You can kind of tell things like Hof may have been here. It's in red because it's really not clear, right? But we do have each, and you can see that, right? Double I, remember. Ch, na, ah. So the ash again. All right, so the neat thing is that you can also look at the different faces of this. So you can look at the west face, for example. We're going to get rid of the east face so we can look at the west face. Here's the west face in a wonderful animal style. But you can also see this. It's not going to change if you look at the different pictures. You can still see, for example, you can just go down the west face. Again, it reads the same way from the top, down the right, and then down the left. So Christ is what's on the cross, the very top. Let's see if we can see that. Christ, yeah, you can pretty much see that. Was, let's get the transcriptions up because again, that's really difficult. So take a second to load in. I guess it's going to zoom us out this time. All right, so Christ. If remembering correctly, I think, what did they say? This was the calc rune. I'm interested now. Let's see. Key. Okay, this one for front vowels and the calc rune elsewhere. Okay, so this is by a consonant, so you have the calc rune. They're saying that you have this rune elsewhere. I don't know if it's on this west face, but no, I'm curious. I felt like I saw it on the other one. See an example of when it talks about fronts, for those unfamiliar, it's by point of articulation. Where in the mouth is your tongue when you're saying these vowels? Where are you moving, right? Like o, right? Like, so there's going to be a front, there's going to be back, and there's going to be higher and low. So I'm not sure. There must not be any on this side. I should look at that beforehand. But so then you have this Old English text. You have lots of different stuff. This is a pretty neat thing that you should just come and look at. And again, it has the not neat thing about this is it doesn't have the prose. But that'd be a big project. And I'm pretty sure this is recently like getting done. So very nice to live, I guess, when we live. And you can come and look at this. Again, I will try to remember to link down this facsimile, Old English Poetry facsimile with the Ruthwell Cross selected here. So let us go back. Okay, let's see. Okay, now we're back. I just wanted to show you some pictures. You can see the inscriptions here. It's on the side. It's not on the front so much. I believe this is one with the Latin inscription here. You can see relief sculptures. Again, this looks like it's the east face maybe of that cross, and you can see the cross itself. This was actually destroyed in part, I believe, by Presbyterian people in the tumultuous early modern period, if you will. But so there are some pictures though of it. Let's go. There we go. Okay, so again, I just wanted to show you here on the east face, we have this top fragment up here, wapda, east, yaft, yeah. And then on the side here, we have the text. So if you want to take the time and translate this, then go ahead. It is very similar to, well, here's a transcription, of course, so don't worry, you can do it yourself if you want. I think it helps to have it kind of in comparison, right? Hina, good. And I don't know, I just think it's useful. So let me look down here real quick. Okay, yeah, so here's one thing. Unkept. I'm not sure what the pronunciation would be, but this ka is a different rune because the is a front vowel. Right. So the front and high, pretty high vowel. So anyways, there is that. Again, we have the west face as well. Chris was on Rodi, Padra der Fusa, Faran como Athara, Tira Amen, each that Al beheld Sara each was mit Sorgen, Idroided, Knach. So you can see that also there's just dialectal differences. It is interesting actually to see some of this looks really interesting, like kinning, right? Like having a separate ligature for this ing sound is well represented by this. What does this make an ing sound? It's a separate in. So in English, you have three nasals: in, and ing, right? And in Old English, you would say the G after the ing. Modern English, you don't in most dialects. So, anyways, so then let's go on and look at the differences. I point you to, well, this is the third Najdorf article I looked at, but it really only actually looks at the second one, the second difference. But that is the Ruthwell Cross inscription in the Dream of the Rood, line 58. And he's kind of being critical of the critics and how little attention they are giving to something like poetic diction. Again, Najdorf is very good with his metrical stuff in his prosody, and just how the difference actually from the Vertelli book version of Dream of the Rood and this version, this small portion, again, from the earlier half. So it seems like, again, that does kind of support this two poems thing, though we don't have anything in the later half of the poem. There, that these people should be more critical. In fact, I will point out now that back, we were looking at the slides when we got to 58a, I actually put in the Ruthwell Cross reading rather than the Vercelli book reading because it does work better. I don't even remember which text I even pulled it from because that's not my own edited text. I didn't take it all and transcribe it or whatever. But I took someone's text. I don't remember whose it is. Probably the one I found from Wikisource up above, so some older one, and then put in my interpretation. But then the only thing I really changed about it though was to change 58a in it. So if you notice, because this is what the Vercelli book actually says, I'll point this out first because I'm already talking about it. It says "To tham Athalinga," to the prince, right? So this is an interesting one because referring to Christ as a prince seems out of place to Najdorf. Okay, and while it's not completely out of place, we'll see it actually in the next poem we look at. Christ is referred to as an Atheling. In this poem, he's not. Okay, this title of calling him to the prince puts him in the middle, like of power rankings, kind of, right? Middling levels of power, right? Rather than the highest and the lowest that he is otherwise, right? He's Lord, right? He is Drikna, he is Frach, right? He's Hallen, right? He's the high things, but he's also really low, right? He's just called a man and he dies, obviously, right? And so it's supposed to show you that. But then calling him a prince really puts him in a prince, like in the middle thing. This is not like a Latin concept of prince, right? It's Atheling. That's not first among equals or anything like that. It's quite what a normal modern English idea of prince, right? It's a middling power thing. So when that seems to be probably a reaction to confusion, actually. So it could have been confused with Athala til Anum, which would have been confusing a Northumbrian nominative plural, Athala, with a misconstrued as a dative singular to the prince, right? And so that's pretty much explains this, though. So you have nobles in unison, which works better metrically. And then if you look above, though, which also points to Ruthwell having an older version of the text, is it what do you notice on the right side, which is from Ruthwell, and from the left side, which is from the Vercelli book? Well, I think it's very obvious. You'll notice on the right side that the Ruthwell one's way shorter. Okay, and what is that? Was hypermetric. It doesn't work. It's not like it doesn't work metrically. It actually works better metrically. It doesn't need the extra stuff. It still works, you know what I mean, on the left, but it's stuff thrown in, right? And so I translated both for you. Then you have, then the young hero made ready. I didn't switch this one, actually, when we went over it earlier. Then the young hero made ready. That was God Almighty. Strong and stern, he ascended on the high gallows, brave in the sight of many when he wanted to free mankind. But over here, on the Ruthwell Cross, and he prepared himself, the God Almighty, when he wished to climb onto the gallows, brave before all men. Right? So I mean, something like some of this is not bad additions. It's just not. It just loses the hypermetric stuff, which is, and you could argue. Some people would say maybe that like, oh, they use the hypermetric version on the cross because just carving longer inscriptions is difficult, but it works better metrically as well. So it just seems like that's the older version, is the hypermetric one on the right, the Ruthwell version. So I can actually share this note here from Folk at the back of this. He says, so for lines, here's his notes for lines 39 through 49 and then 56 to 64, but I'll just read this a little bit. These are the lines partially preserved and somewhat abridged on the Ruthwell Cross. For the full text of the inscription, see the additions cited above. At lines 39 through 40, the corresponding passage on the cross consists of a single pair of hypermetric verses, running as follows in normalized spelling. On yireda hina god almichti, da he wolde on yargan estigan. The greater regularity of the form suggests that the inscription at this point gives us an earlier reading rather than an abridgment. The greater economy of the inscription, a feature prized in verse, the classical sort, also makes for a superior reading, especially as the added material is mostly rather conventional. But Yeung Haleth is certainly a welcome addition, reinforcing the heroic aspect of the action, an aspect that the poet is all along at pains to emphasize as proper to Christ and his divine nature. Cook cites classical parallels to the notion that Christ here strips himself as for battle, and a wolf quotes Ambrose, who makes this stripping voluntary and heroic, saying, I won't actually read the Latin for you, I'll read translation. Most rightly, when he was about to ascend the cross, he laid aside his royal garments, cited from Expositio Evangeli Secundum Lucam. The next few words of the inscription corresponding to lines 41 and 42 of our text are partially defaced, but the reconstructed verses look like an unmetrical abridgment. All the other remnants of the inscription show verse-by-verse correspondence with our text, with only minor verbal variations. He doesn't actually mention lines 58 at all, which is interesting. The Folk is highly regarded. If you want a rather difficult old-school philological approach to Old English as a grammar, like if you want like a newer one that's pretty straightforward, you could get like Drout's Quick and Easy Old English. But if you get Folk's Introductory Grammar to Old English, which I think you can actually find digitally for free online somewhere, it is a lot rougher in some sense, but it is very old school in a sense and very thorough. He does it very well. So Folk is quite an accepted philologist, but so just that's a look. I want to point out real quick, because we'll mention this again here soon, is the word haleth here. Okay, all right, which hero, it is a singular noun here, hero. Just remember that. So if you want to look more at runes in particular, if you think the Ruthwell Cross is interesting, there is a new text called the Ruthwell Cross and its texts, a new reconstruction and an edition of the Ruthwell Crucifixion poem. There are older stuff. I am not really all that familiar with really any of the texts, but this one is rather new. It's only a couple years old. It's also quite hefty in price, which is not surprising looking at the publisher. So I haven't read it yet. But you do have a more general handbook on runes by Michael P. Barnes. It does have a chapter on Anglo-Saxon runes, Futhorc. And if you want particularly to get a look just at the English runes, Anglo-Saxon runes, Futhorc, you can try out RI Page and an introduction to English runes. And these are recommended to me by my professor largely, so I have dug very little into this myself. Mostly use online tools because I'm a college student. Anyway, so let's get into the second supplementary, or third, whatever this is considered technically. We're not going to spend too much time with this. I don't want to scare you. I know this is long already. This is the Descent into Hell, also called John the Baptist's Prayer, though I wanted to say that it's really the guy who wrote this book over here, right? John the Baptist's Prayer, or the Descent into Hell, from the Exeter Book, text translation and critical study by Rambaran Olm. Okay, this Olm over here, Rambaran Olm, is the first person really to call it John the Baptist's Prayer. The author thinks that's a more appropriate title. It is normally called Descent into Hell, but it's also not a very popular Old English poem at all, right? It is heavily criticized normally. Shippey, even, who's a favorite scholar of mine, describes it as clumsy and confusing. And so it's not a very well-regarded poem, But this is what I was talking about earlier on. The Dream of the Rood is from the point of view of the cross. I don't know if I explained that very well. It's from the point of view of the cross, and it is seeing Christ come as this conqueror to defeat death, right? But it does gives us lots of sadness. It gives us a lot of great hope, though, as well. It's a great, fantastic poem. This, though, is the Harrowing of Hell. While not as well regarded as a poem, it is a very common medieval motif, and it's a very cool one, personally, I think. Right, so let's see. Okay, yeah, so the Descent into Hell, actually, you do get it a little bit in another Old English poem called Christ and Satan, which is in the Junius manuscript, like Genesis B. This poem may have influenced Paradise Lost in some sense, actually. But it is lines 366 through 662 of Christ and Satan. And the fall of Satan is the first part, and then the temptation of Christ is the later part. And that poem starts as Wastat Ink Yellen Yerken Aryenimend. So, not to be confused with this version, though, which is from the Exeter book. And this is a separate poem of 137 lines. You can find it there in Exeter book, folios 119v to 121v. But the Descent into Hell you actually do have in a couple places. Like there's a scene in Piers Plowman, which is Middle English text, Middle English allegory, and there's also a small fragment from the Auchinlek manuscript. Also, Sor Orfeo kind of has some ideas of it, some imagery, like ideas of topos, but it's, even though it's obvious about Orpheus, but some parallels to the Christ Harrowing. So let's briefly get into this. I just wanted to introduce. I'm just going to go over the first few lines of the poem. Again, you can, those links back there, if you want them, I'll put them in the description. I'll try to remember. This is all stuff you can just pretty much find online. Ungunun him un uchdan athorkundan maith. Yerwan to yeonga, wiston gumene yemot. Athelingas lich, arthana bithacht. Oldan wer you wif, wopa bimanan. Athelingas dath, ana huila. Reonga beroton, rast was akolad. Hard was hinsith, haleth waron modia. The he that tham beria, blitha fundan. Hom seo murmenda Maria undaired. Het he odramid, erles dochter. I think it does give you some nice poetic language, at least. So here's the translation. In the early morning. So Uchtan is like the early hours of the morning, right? You might have seen, I know it was kind of popular, the idea of Chara, Uchkara, I think. Like the kind of anxiety, early morning anxiety, pretty much. So Athel, noble women, over here, noble kind women, kind of, to prepare themselves for the journey, the council of men knew. So Yemot, as in like meeting, or Yemot just means council, kind of. The prince's body had been covered in an earth house. So again, this strictly uses Atheling, right? The prince's body, as what it calls it here. Earth house, earth, arna. Arna just means house. You can see like a bake house could be like a barkarna. Bakarna, like a bake house, but you can also just put bakhus. So anyways, wish the weary women to be moan with weeping, the prince's death alone for a while, to deplore in mourning. The resting place was chilled. Hard was the hence journey. The heroes were brave. So this is one thing I want you to look at here, actually. Haleth waron modia. And I think, remember, Haleth meant, what it mean? It meant man. And the other one, and so that's not the same. So that we're gonna look at that in just a second. That they at the gentle barrow found came the grieving Mary at dayred. So just dawn, literally dayred. I just kept it here. She called the other noble's daughter with her. Earl is like a high-ranking noble. It doesn't quite mean earl in like what we think in a modern sense, like jarl or whatever. But it's a high-ranking daughter or a high-ranking noble. So like above an elder man or a thing, probably. So let's look at this real quick. I wanted to look at this and note. So we have Haleth Waron Modia. Okay, and so we're gonna once again, I need to get a program up. Well, I probably could if I just figured out exactly what I was doing. share all of it at once, so it's easy to switch, easier to switch, and maybe I'll mess with that. But I want to show you my note real quick. So here's my note. Okay, so this is the one from earlier. This is the line from Dream of the Rood. This is the line from the Descent to Hell, right? So you have Haleth Minse Leova, right? So you have my beloved hero man kind of thing going on there. Okay, I should probably write this out for you actually. So this is my beloved hero, and this is the heroes were right. Okay, so this is going to help us actually because what do we have here? We have Haleth and Haleth, and one means heroes and one means hero. So interesting. That doesn't really make sense. I think you would know, even in modern English, right? Obviously enough that your plural and your singular are not going to be the same, right? And I mean, yes, very rare circumstances they are, right? But they're not normal. So so let's look at it real quick. So Haleth means say Leova. So we have a nominative singular masculine a stem Haleth in this case, right? So which means that our plural in this case actually this version of Haleth would be Halethas. Okay, so say Leova is a weak declension masculine nominative singular noun, and mean is a strong declension with no weak form there at all, masculine nominative singular. So these are then agreeing that this has to be a masculine nominative singular, right? This can't be my beloved heroes, and they do not agree. But then you have the interesting idea, or the interesting thing, that Haleth then just means heroes here, though. Well, how do we know in this case then? So you have Waron is a past plural, and there's no other option for it. And Modia is a strong declension plural, either nominative or accusative. And so then this has to be plural as well. And so that actually does work because Haleth does appear in another version. So instead of having the a stem Haleth, you have the nominative plural masculine thorn stem, which are rare and irregular, as Hale, which then would make the plural Haleth, the nominative plural, I should say, Haleth or Halethas, and then the nominative singular Haleth, Hala. So Haleth, Halethas. So just a small little bit to be on the lookout for. So then let us go back. I think I messed up my slides. That's okay. I fix that in a GIF because now it's not slide showing. There we go. All right, so that's pretty much it, right? We're going to briefly look at one more just because I think supplementing, I like the diachronic approach. I like to be able to show you, which is one reason we've looked at the Middle English manuscripts in the past, actually, is because you get to see just the difference. So in this case, we're going to briefly, very, very, very briefly, it's a very small fragment. If you go and look, actually, so you see this page here. This is from the Auchinlek manuscript. It is a manuscript that has 44 pieces of literature. I've read some of these, like of Arthur and of Merlin. It is the very first English Arthurian romance, not the first English romance. That'd be King Horn, Middle English, I should say. Romance is a high Middle Ages thing anyways, so you wouldn't get them in Old English. Though you do have kind of like maybe bits and pieces in Old English stuff that kind of are romantic in a sense. So this was made in the 1330s in London. Today it's in Scotland. This is the manuscript name. It's just called the Auchinlek manuscript. I realized I didn't pull over the title, so that says Auchinlek Harrowing of Hell fragment. And so I highly recommend, if you are looking at Middle English, that you look at the University of Michigan's Middle English Compendium, which is just a Middle English dictionary. Very useful. And then you can look at the Auchinlek manuscript itself here. The neat thing is that it will just give you on like a normal web page what the text says, and then if you click the images that has like a little parchment image, You click on that, and it'll show you that page. And then, but there's more, right? So you can't actually move. You can't click on that one and then move the page. You have to go down, scroll down on the actual text, and click on the next page if you want to see the next page. So this is page 2 because page 1 is torn, and you can only read like the last word or two on each line, and so very heavily fragmented at the beginning, and it doesn't seem to really have much of an ending either. So what I want to share with you real quick is just the first complete thoughts, essentially, after that page. So the start of this page, actually, right here, the top left. So let's do that real quick. And you will notice immediately that this is much closer to modern English. So anyways, until Chris loket tham anto, excuse me, as men achto prisons do, he lichted to out of his hair tour, sorry, excuse me, wow, into Saint Maribau. He was born for our misdeed in this world in power. In this world he suffered dead, for to deliver us from the quaid. Then Jesu had spilt his blood for our sinners on the road. He named him the right way unto hell for Sotho to sigh. So you'll notice immediately that this has much more of a familiar rhyme scheme as well. We do still have thorns, which you won't really see in like Chaucer, for example. So it will drop out of use. It will be completely gone pretty much when you get a printing press. You don't put thorns on a printing press, I guess. And that's why you have like something like ye old shop or whatever at some tourist spot. The Y was a kind of a replacement for the thorn sometimes. So it's really actually never meant to be said ye. Why would you put that pronoun there? It's just the old shop or whatever. So this is a yo. This is a new letter you see in Middle English. It pretty much is the H of Old English, so kind of like a modern GH. So, but you'd say it unlike the modern GH, which has a variety of well, there's just a variety of them. So, until Christ looked unto them, as a man ought to prisoners do, he descended out from his high tower into St. Mary's bower, is literally what it says, just room or chamber, I guess. I'm not familiar with it meaning like a womb or anything, but it probably does here, I guess, unless it's just saying he lived with her because he was her son. He was born for our misdeeds, in this world in power clothed, in this world he suffered deeds, to deliver us from evil or the devil. So quid is not a word that survives in modern English, actually. I think maybe it does in like a northern dialect or Scots or something, but it can mean evil or like wickedness, kind of. It can also be a stand-in for the devil sometimes, so just wanted to convey that. Then Jesus had spilt his blood for our sins on the cross, still using Rood here for cross. He took or entered him the right just way unto hell, forsooth to say. So this is, again, really only, you don't need the fragment, I guess. No, it'd be nice to have, but this is showing us that he's going into hell, that it's descent into hell to take, as Ælfric mentions, right, he rises with a host, right? He goes and he shows the demons who's boss, and he comes up with a host of saints with him. And it is a rather beautiful, honestly. I think the idea of harrowing, the harrowing of hell is a magnificent one, personally. But anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this. This is the end of it. I know this is even longer than the last one. But I only showed you bits of Dream of the Rood. I only showed you a very small bit of this. It's not much of this, or even a chunk of Descent into Hell or St. John or John Baptist's Prayer. And you can go and do those on your own if you would like to, or at some other point in the future, or not at all. I mean, I just feel like this is stuff that to supplement you with the material that is kind of there in Old English, but also that is related to the homilies, right? You'll get a lot of religious stuff in the Old English poetry. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. Happy Easter. God bless. And hopefully I'll have might be just a more, I've been having a hard one to find from Ælfric to fit into May. before I do Pentecost in June, and we'll see what I come up with. So, but anyways, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below, or get a hold of me some other way, however you can. So, happy to help. Thank you for watching.